G'day guys, welcome to the Unofficial Scorecard Podcast, a podcast where we talk all things boxing and occasionally the wider world of combat sports. This is episode 80, and on today's episode, guys, I am joined by a returning mate of the show, long-time boxing writer and all-round top bloke, Anson Wainwright. So, guys, on today's show, what did we get into? I know it's been about 2 weeks or a week and a half or so, but we have to get in and recap the amazing Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson fight, in which Shakur Stevenson kind of, not unexpectedly, but certainly blew everyone's mind. We got into that fight. We got into the undercard, Keyshawn Davis. We got into Bruce Carrington. Do we touch on Jarell Miller's hair? You'll have to listen/watch and find out. And also, guys, we jumped into the recent Nick Ball, Brandon Figueroa. Bit of a tear-up, an absolute war over in the UK. And this coming weekend, we've got Leigh Wood and Josh Warrington. Maybe not this weekend or the week after. Whatever it is, it's coming up. So what a great time to get the UK's own Anson Wainwright on to really break down the significance of those two huge UK-style fights. Also, guys, we jump into the upcoming return of the King. We're all boxing fans, so he has to be our king, King Rye, somehow miraculously taking on Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title. And also that undercard, a really good fight. Gary Antoine Russell and Andy Hirooka. Richardson Hitchens, Oscar Duarte's on the card, and Frank Martin, Nahir Albright. Guys, it was a ton of fun talking to Anson. He's such a nice bloke. We had some serious technical hurdles that were all my fault getting this podcast live and out there. We get into that a little bit and more of that in the outro. But with all that being said, Anson couldn't have been more generous and easier to deal with, where I couldn't have blamed him if he was like, all right, man, this is just too much hassle. I'm out of here. But to his credit, and I thank him for his time and his patience, he was happy to stay around, and a couple of little reschedules. And here we are. We got the chat, which was an absolute ton of fun. So let's get to that now. All right, well, here I am once again, joined by a long-time boxing writer, regular columnist at The Ring magazine. You know him from his excellent regular Best I Faced and sometimes even the Best I Trained features. It's returning mate of the show, Anson Wainwright. Anson, thanks for coming back on, mate.
My pleasure, Zach. It's good to be here. Thank you.
No, it's like we were just saying, long overdue for a chat, and I didn't help us yesterday with a big power outage and many technical difficulties. So I need to thank you again publicly on the show, mate, for being willing to be generous enough to work through all my technical issues. So,
no problem.
It's been a bit of a battle, but
I've had
we
these
got
things
here.
happen to me over the years where something's happened and it's thrown me a curveball, so no problem at all.
Excellent, mate. Well, I appreciate it. Well, let's get straight into it, mate, because we're about 2 weeks, a week and a half or so removed from an absolutely brilliant performance by Shakur Stevenson becoming a 4-weight world champion with a rather incredibly dominant win over Teofimo Lopez. We've always got to start at the top, Anson. So straight off the bat, mate, what were your thoughts on this fight? Did it play out the way you were thinking beforehand, or did you get a bit of a shock on fight night?
I think I liked Shakur to win. My questions, I guess, going in were, how was he going to go by going up in weight a little bit? His first fight was against Teofimo. He didn't test the waters against, perhaps we say a lesser light. He went straight in for the big dog. And my other one was how Teofimo was going to be, because we see him as a very hot and cold fighter. When on his biggest nights, Statin, Lomachenko, and Josh Taylor were his best performances. So I wondered if he would raise his game to that kind of level or what have you. None of it seemed to matter in the end. Shakur was, as you say, was extremely dominant. I think one was it about 11 rounds to 1, which I would have thought was possible, but at the same time, I probably would have thought it would. My guess going in, if you said to me, probably would have been about 8-4. I thought he would have won and been that step ahead. But I still thought Teofimo would have moments. It proved to be perhaps more a moment or two here and there throughout the whole fight. It barely, it was extremely dominant. And that was why I think Shakur has now moved up to, to number 3 in the ring pound for pound ratings behind, Usyk and Inoue. He jumped over Bam, who's obviously on a bit of a tear himself. So it was seen by the ratings panel as being, just that. And honestly, by the end of the year, a bit like when he beat Oscar Valdez, it wouldn't surprise me if that becomes performance of the year. It was that dominant against a big name, a guy who had once been pound for pound rated himself, but it probably only dropped off because his performances have been a little hot and cold and what have you, and more cold since the Josh Taylor fight. So I think from that point of view, it was seen as Shakur kind of finally. We've always believed he's had potential, but he's now made that leap, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we speak about the weight. Obviously, that was a big question mark how he was going to look. I thought, geez, he looked absolutely fantastic. He didn't lack any strength at all. Mm-hmm. Did that take you by surprise, Anson?
In a way, yes. But I mean, we've seen that over the years with the likes of Mayweather. These guys have gone up and they've still been, even though they might not look as tall, they're still very physically strong. Like Terence Crawford, Shakur's good friend was much the same. When he was at 147, he went to 54, and then you saw him. Perhaps you wondered, how would he be? Because against Madrimov, and he was able to win, and then jump middleweight and go to super middleweight, and able to beat Canelo. And obviously, it wasn't a strength thing, but he was obviously able to hold up in that regard. So I think we've seen it, but you've still got to see it in the fight. We can kind of make guesses or whatever, but until it happens, we don't know. But yeah, he didn't look, inferior. He sort of stood in there and made Teofimo miss. And much like the fight before that, William Zepeda. Zepeda's a guy that brings a lot of pressure and throws a lot of punches, and it wasn't something that he was able to fight his fight. Shakur, did his thing and won that one as well. So yeah, I think it's always nice. We've seen Terence bow out and retire at the top, and now almost Teofimo's taken the baton, and he's that young American, like 28, but he's still, you think in the thick of his prime. You'd imagine he could fight this summer and maybe the fall. That'd be an excellent year, and do it for a few more years and really kind of lay down that marker for how good he is.
Yeah, I was much like you, Anson. I thought it would be like an 8-4, 9-3 fight for Shakur. I liked him big, but he fought differently to how I thought he would, and he was a little bit more dominant, fighting a little bit more aggressively. I thought he would be fully on the back foot the whole time.
Me too.
Very similar to the Zepeda performance. I thought Teofimo would really be trying to exert that perceived, at least going in, strength and physicality advantage and really try and cut the corner off hard. But I was really surprised. Shakur took center ring and largely stayed there for long portions of the fight. And the thing that impressed me so much, and I think it was the thing that all of us were expecting to happen, was the speed of his brain. Like, people say ring IQ and all that type of thing, but it looked to me like Shakur was not one step ahead, but 2 or 3. It was like almost as Teofimo was, and who's a pretty quick thinker himself in a reactionary sense, a little bit slower when he has to create. And that certainly played into Shakur's hands in this particular matchup. But it was like you could almost see Teofimo trying to figure out what he was about to do. And before he could even start it, he was just eating jabs. So every time a thought would start to grow in his head like a little seed, it just gets immediately pushed out by the jab, and he's like, oh, okay, I want to think of something else now. And like Shakur was just so far and above, smarter than him and faster than him mentally, which I wasn't shocked by, but doing it on the front foot and actually holding that center of the ring and even at points pushing Teofimo back, super impressive. I didn't see that sort of style clash playing out that way. Did that sort of take you by surprise as well?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna go into your point. It was interesting because you wondered how it would play out because they're both basically counter punches, and that doesn't necessarily play out into an exciting fight. But it was better than in that regard. But Shakur just dominated in such a way. Teofimo, there was no point when he kind of looked in it, and he made Teofimo look rather ordinary. And it's still a bit early to say this with Shakur, but obviously he's a 4-weight world champion and a legit 4-weight world champion. But when we've seen Shakur perform like this, Oscar Valdez was a few years ago, but he pretty much whitewashed Oscar Valdez, and that was was really impressive. But when you see it, you think back to like the late great Pernell Whitaker, who also stood in the pocket a bit more. People think, oh no, he wasn't a puncher, but he actually didn't move around as much as people think. He would stand there and make you miss and make you pay. And I think when you see Whitaker, he was able to make guys like Azuma Nelson, to a large extent, it was a draw. Chavez, he made guys who are in the Hall of Fame look like they'd never put a pair of gloves on. And to some extent, that's what I think Shakur does. It's not like he goes in there and he wins. He wins in such a definitive way that you forget afterwards how good the guy he was in with was. He just makes them look very, very ordinary. And I think that's a testament to how good he is. I actually spoke to Josh Taylor at the start of the week about the performance, and he did say that he thought that Teofimo would win like this, and but at the same time he thinks that the bigger tests, he doesn't think anybody at this weight, is going to be able to do much to him. He thinks the bigger challenges will come up at welterweight. He mentioned Haney, which I think would be an intriguing one. I don't know if it would be exciting. I think perhaps not, but I think there's that. He also mentioned Ryan Garcia. I think to that point, if Ryan were to beat Barrios, it would be perceived as a big fight. But I think in terms of the way he fights, as long as he didn't, get caught by, a big left hook, which, so far Shakur's always, boxed extremely well and he's very tight defensively. If he were to, if he's what we think he is, then he should have no problem. Just basic skill for skill, he would be far too much for Ryan Garcia. But I think it's that almost like Mayweather. You see them they've got to go through the weights before you start seeing them tested. And I think at the moment he's in the thick of his prime. So I think he just, unless he decided one morning to woke up and he's going to go to middleweight, much at middleweight, it's another story. But unless he decided to make it, an abnormal jump, I think where he is, he's the man.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. I agree. And you touched on something there about Shakur's defense, which is obviously one of his huge, pretty obvious strengths. But also, too, like, and the thing that I think he really needs to get credit for is he's obviously got a God-given ability like ring IQ, mental acuity, mental speed, whatever it is. He can see things and execute on them faster than anyone else he's fought so far. And he's fought some pretty damn good guys. So we got to give him credit for that. But also it's his... but he's beating these guys mentally before they even get started, but he's doing it in a very basic way. He's throwing jabs, he's throwing 1-2s. He throws the hook occasionally, he moves out. He always prioritizes defense over offense. He stays safe. He doesn't take chances. He's not like this flashy guy that's throwing all these combinations that we've never seen before. He's doing it with rather basic skills. And I mean that as a compliment, A lot of guys, when they get to the top, they forget about the basics. Everything's got to be a gigantic uppercut and a leaping left hook and all these type of things. But Shakur is dominating, as you pointed out, borderline Hall of Fame, time will tell level fighters just with basic skills and really tight defense. Every time Teo got close and he wanted to clinch, it was an overhook and then the other hand was up on his chin. He never leaves opening for these guys. I thought it was such a great reminder that the basics pay dividends if executed properly, even at the top end.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to Mayweather, Crawford. What they did at such a high level. And they say, I think, almost saying basics, like you said, it's a compliment, but it sounds like it doesn't sound like it. But what they do it so well on such a rarefied air level that it's difficult for anybody to get a bead on them. You almost wish they were all around at the same time, prime for prime, and then we'd have a better idea. Because I think as we stood here today, I can't see Shakur not going to the Hall of Fame. I wish we could see him and Gervonta fight. If they could fight in the summer, that'd be great. And then if he could fight, I think a good challenge would be someone like Gary Antonio Russell. Antoine Russell, I beg your pardon. He's, I think he's one of those guys that's a bit in the dark, but a very good guy. I'd like to see him, fight, some more big fights at this weight. I think Haney's probably the one a bit further down the road. But I just wish, going back to what you said, he was able to do this and fight a Mayweather, fight a Crawford, prime for prime, or even his good buddy Keyshawn Davis, who looked fantastic on the undercard. Both those guys looked like that should be a great fight, but I believe they're so close that it's never going to happen. So we kind of need a WWE moment where one of them turns heel and they get into it with each other, and then we have the fight. Because at the moment, it doesn't look like happening.
Well, Anson, you've done the hosting role for me. Perfect segue. Let's move into the co-main event. Keyshawn Davis. He did look fantastic. Did that fight sort of play out the way you're expecting? Jermaine Ortiz, a bit of a spoiler historically. What were your thoughts on the co-main with
I
Keyshawn?
thought that with Keyshawn, that it was kind of set for him to go make that splash in the. Obviously, last time he laid an egg, it wasn't good what happened in his hometown. It left a bad taste in everybody's mouths. And it was like he couldn't come out and there be anything. He needed to come out and remind us just how good he is again. And he did that. He was able to stop Ortiz late, which kind of put that exclamation point on it, sometimes you get a guy like if Shakur is not really their forte and they just pull out the whitewash. I think Keyshawn, as good as he was, he kind of needed to go and get that stoppage. He wasn't obviously with anyone as good as Teofimo, but he got the win. He seems, again, he's calling out Haney. Personally, I'd like to see him try and get a belt at 140 next time. Don't just jump up in weight. I would like to see him just try and win a belt. I understand we're not going to see him and Shakur fight, but get a belt before you go to 147. But I don't know how easily he makes the weight. I mean, it wasn't long ago he was at 147, and maybe it was just a pit stop. But it's another one that I will be intrigued and perhaps not surprised if all of a sudden his next fight is at welterweight. But yeah, I think I'd like to see him. He left that impression of when you've seen the fight. It's not one of those, if he doesn't fight till November, I don't care. I want to see him in June, July. I want to see him again twice this year. He fought early enough and he was impressive enough that I want to see him, go at it and be out there again soon.
Yeah, and the Haney call-out sort of took me by surprise. First fight at 140. I agree with you completely. What's the rush? Why are you desperate to get out of this division? I get it. Guys want the biggest high-profile fights possible. The names at 140 besides Shakur now aren't that huge, and as you pointed out, they're like family. So the chances of that fight happening without a WWE storyline or some help from a writing team is probably not going to be very. Yeah. Likely moving forward, but that's a great fight. Gary Antoine Russell, Alberto Puello, Dalton Smith. These are all fantastic fights at 140. And we'll get into Gary Antoine Russell and his fight coming up with Andy Hiroka soon. But I'd love him to stick around. 140 is a great division, but I guess it's kind of does he want to stay and take tough fights against lesser names or take tough fights against more high-profile names for more money? I can't blame him if he sort of wanted to chase the money. But as a fan, I agree with you. I'd love to see him stick around.
I mean, when you look at those ones, I think I'd favour him over Hitchens. I think him and Dalton would be interesting to see. They do it over here. I mean, Dalton obviously has to fight Puello. I don't want to go into it when we're going to get into it in a little bit. But for Keyshawn, there's Gary Antoine Russell would be a heck of a fight, like you said, tough fights, and maybe he sees 47 as being easier, for one of a better way of putting it. But yeah, definitely like to see some of that. And hopefully he's out in the summer. I think when you make that type of that performance, I'd like to think it's not like you're on the shelf for 10 months. I'd like to think we've seen him back in the middle of the year and everything. So fingers crossed he's back out soon.
Yeah, and hopefully they've learnt from the Nahir Albright team role.
That was not nice. In his hometown, his big homecoming, and that happened. That was a big shame.
Yeah, hopefully it's a big lesson for him moving forward, because it could be an exciting rest of the year, as you pointed out, if he wants to stay busy. But also we had a fantastic, borderline star-making performance by Bruce Shoo Carrington with his knockout victory over Carlos Castro. Now, I just have to say straight off the bat, Anson, this one took me by surprise. I did not expect Carlos Castro to come in as sharp as he was. I thought he was fading. I didn't understand why he was getting that shot after a year out and officially a loss on his record. But geez, I'll tell you what, about 60 seconds into the first round, he proved me wrong. What an awesome fight. A great performance from both guys with a definitive ending. What were your thoughts from that? I think it was 7 rounds, wasn't it? 7th round stoppage?
9, I think.
9. Yes, you're correct. Thank you. But great fight nonetheless.
Do you know, it's funny because going in, I would have thought Shakur would get rid of him easy. Not Shakur, I thought Bruce would get rid of, Shushu Carrington would get rid of Castro in about 6 rounds and be, very definitive. But in a way, while he got hit and we saw him hurt and everything, in fact, he actually grew his reputation because it was an exciting fight. We would rather see an exciting fight for him. He's probably one of the dominant, performers, but I think he was still able to become impressive and dominant at the same time. But also there was a rocky moment in there. So yeah, I mean, I thought he did well. I'm looking forward to seeing again with him. I mean, that was the thing I loved about the card is you got all those guys in, and I think with him again, he left you wanting to see more because before that performance, he's very technically sound and he was able to beat guys in impressive fashion. We'd never seen him. I can't think he'd been down or really hurt in any of his fights before that. So it was nice to see that, that exchange in the fight that just wasn't, one-sided. But yeah, it was a very good performance and leaves, much like the other two we've just talked about, leaves us wanting to see him, and I don't know. I think he's not young where he's 22, 23. I think he's more like 28. So I think Top Rank have got Espinoza. They've got. I think they've certainly promoted Angelo Leo in the past. So I think Leo as one of those type of fights would be great if he could do that. Just get a unification, get him in big fights. He's not one of these guys. He needs a year or two marinating as champion with a couple of defenses and yeah, definitely it was impressive to me.
Yeah, get him to work, hopefully. And I guess we have to talk about the other fight. And, boxing has a way of doing this. Three really good fights. One pretty good fight, Carrington Castro, I thought was fantastic and a definitive performance. And, but it is boxing. We historically have the fan man, we have the ear bite, and now we have the toupee. Just when we think we've seen it all.
Absolutely.
Boxing just throws up another curveball for us. So I can't even really remember the actual fight itself, but as we know, Jarell Miller had a glued-on toupee and got hit with an uppercut, and it came loose and was flapping around, and he threw it out into the crowd. The sport of kings.
Absolutely,
just when you think
it never ceases to amaze you. If you were writing a WWE type storyline, that wouldn't have come into your head. It was quite. I think thankfully it was one of these. It was more funny than like with Fan Man. It was like wow, but it was obviously dangerous and everything. We see stuff happen, and it's normally like doesn't paint boxing in a good light. It's something that happens as controversial. And this was just something that was just funny. It could have happened, I suppose, in other sports where you had an NBA basketball player and they all of a sudden that happened to them. But it was just a lighter moment in our sport, I think.
Yeah, and credit to Jarell Miller. When something like that happens, you've just got to roll with it and have a laugh too. And he showed a good sense of humor. So good on him. But as for the actual fight itself, I thought it was rather forgettable to the point where I actually can't even really remember it. So the toupee stole the show. But let's move on to last weekend, Anson. Over in the UK, Nick Ball was defending his WBA featherweight title against Brandon Figueroa in what turned out to be an absolute tear-up, a great fight. And, we sort of spoke about definitive endings with the Carrington Castro fight. This one certainly had a definitive ending in the 12th with Brandon Figueroa knocking out Nick Ball. What was the feeling on the ground over in the UK? Was this just a complete shock? I favoured Ball personally myself, but the moment was shocking. But a Figueroa win didn't floor me, even though I thought it was less likely. But what's the feeling on the ground in the UK?
Well, I spoke to a couple of weeks out. I spoke to Carl Frampton to kind of get his thoughts on the fight, and I think me and him were in a similar kind of position. We favoured Ball. We just thought it was, in terms of the style of fight, it was an excellent style of fight because Figueroa isn't the guy you've got to go looking for. He brings the pressure. So does Nick Ball. So they were just going to come two combustible elements and just collide in the ring. And we were just going to just sit there and enjoy a fight between two probably top 5 featherweights. So it had real implications on the world stage. Obviously, it was a world title fight, but you were going to see real movement amongst the top guys. I think again, Carl and I spoke about what we wondered was what did Figueroa have, and perhaps it was smart matchmaking by Ball's team, Queensbury, because you ended up with Figueroa who'd lost to Fulton and just didn't look great. and then he came back and got a decision against Joaquin Gonzalez again. Didn't look great, but that was, I think, the Joaquin Gonzalez fight was last summer, so he'd had a bit of time, and it was like, is that time off? Has that served him well? How much does he have left? And obviously, that answered in the fight. We saw an excellent fight. Both guys had moments. I thought, that as the fight progressed, certainly towards the later rounds, the Figueroa seemed to be kind of coming on and then put a few rounds together. You never know the way the judges are gonna score it, and the fact that it's in it was in England, it was in Ball's hometown, so that you kind of got the sense coming out of the 12th, leave it all in there, guys, or Figueroa, because we don't know how this is going to be. This is very, very close. Well, he didn't need the 3 minutes, did he? He didn't need 15, 20 seconds. He landed a thunderbolt, and that pretty much, although it didn't end it, that was the beginning of the end. He put him down, and it came not long afterwards. But a really, really good performance from Figueroa, who I think him and Shushu Carrington, we didn't mention it in the last one, but that would be a great fight, But I think, probably just felt as though the timing was right. This was going to be a really good name on Ball's resume, but probably he's going to have to go deep to do it. But it proved that actually, Figueroa still had quite a lot left, and was able to get the win in a great fight. And he's a guy that can't be in a bad fight either.
Yeah, and how Nick Ball got up from that first knockdown, like it was almost like the reverse Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury was on his back against Wilder, seemingly completely unconscious. Yeah. It looked like Ball was face down. The fight was over. The count gets to 5 or 6, and he just gets up. Amazing determination and recuperative ability and all that type of thing. Ultimately, it wasn't enough, and he was stopped shortly after. But my God, that I think it was a left hook from southpaw that Figueroa landed on the replays. He was looking at the floor, and landed right on the point of the chin. If you're Nick Ball's team, you're probably thinking, geez, I'm not saying lucky punch, but, a lot of times when guys aren't looking at the target, the shots miss, I've seen online, I don't necessarily think there's cause for a rematch, but I've seen on the internet there's been a lot of talk for a rematch. Is that sort of something that seems feasible to you, mate? And Nick Ball's team in this early stages have they clarified their stance on whether they would like to seek an immediate rematch, or what's the status there?
I haven't heard anything from Ball's team, but what I did hear is Turkey said after the fight that he'd like Figueroa to be on Canelo's undercard in September, I think in Riyadh, like September the 12th. It's Mexico versus the world. And I can imagine that if Turkey tends to get. So if he wants to put Figueroa on that card, Figueroa probably gets a nice payday and goes on there. And in terms of the timing, you'd think after a tough fight like that, he's going to have a couple of months off, and then he'd be back in the summer in training camp. So the timing of it seems to fit as well. I don't know who they would look at as an opponent. I'd have no problem them running it back. It probably doesn't necessarily need to be next. I think both guys could go off. Figueroa could do this, and then you could have Ball come back. And perhaps try to get it back in the win column. I'd be interested to see what happens with Ball, because he's just quite a small guy. He doesn't look like he could go up to super feather. Yeah, he's muscular, but obviously the guys are also going to be that bit bigger at 130. So I don't know whether he's able to, kind of reinvent himself, because it strikes me as the type of loss that could be difficult to come back from, because one, it was his first loss. He was stopped. He was stopped in front of his home fans. It was obviously the nature of the one punch before that. Again, I'm trying to think. I don't really remember him being hurt, and he was obviously dropped and then later stopped. So it's one of those. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Nick Ball until perhaps September. He probably right into the fall, and then what he looks to do, and who he looks to fight. I don't think we'll see it next personally, but that's not anything I've heard from Ball's team. I just suspect that Figueroa will be on Canelo undercard.
Yeah, okay. No, fair enough. And it is interesting to see what Nick Ball's going to do next. But for such a guy small in stature and a short reach, he still finds like he was finding that that way to land that lead left uppercut on Figueroa. Not really a punch that shorter guys should be able to land on bigger guys. So, it'd be interesting, but you would think he'd be too small for featherweight. He's a world champion, defended the title multiple times. So it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens next with him. But I have to put my hand up, Anson, because I didn't watch any of this undercard. The fights from the UK and Australia start at, depending on the time of the year, it could be 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. So I just woke up for the main event on this one, but I have seen some online chatter about Andrew Kane and Jack Turner. I've never heard or seen of either guy. What sort of background can you give us on these guys? And for me, selfishly, are their fights worth going back and watching?
Kane, his fight was a really good one. It was a world title eliminator. I think he was doing quite well, and then he was down. I believe it was the 8th round. He was down twice, body shots, and it looked like that was the end. Managed to get out of the round somehow. Often you see like a body shot and it breaks a guy, and they can't continue. He was able to somehow find his way through, and then in the following round, it was quite shocking. He was able to get the win. I think Kane is like he's sort of worth a look and everything. Interesting because he's obviously at bantamweight, which is most of the titles are in Japan. There's a few Mexicans that are pretty good, so it's Japan and Mexico have got the stranglehold on that weight, which might mean he's got to go overseas. Incidentally, again, I don't know if you would have seen this online, that after Ball was stopped, when obviously Figueroa's team jumped in the ring, and Andrew Kane got in there. He's obviously close with Nick Ball, and he went over and he tried to kick one of the members of Figueroa's team, and Leigh, who works with Queensbury, was able to get him away, and it didn't really go into a melee, but it was close. But he definitely threw a kick and landed, much like we saw Nick Ball do when one of his previous fights was at TJ Doheny.
TJ, yeah.
So it was one of those. I don't know. There's been people crying out for him to get possibly even a ban or a fine or whatever. So that perhaps will be interesting to see how it happens. Whether that takes a little bit of the gloss off his win, but I think that was a WBC final eliminator. So I think he's in there with Takuma perhaps before the end of the year. So that would be a good fight. But I don't know, like obviously going over to Japan, it's going to be tough if he's going to go there or possibly Mexico, whether his team, are able to bring somebody over here. But I think he's in and around it. But bantamweight might be the deepest division in boxing. So it's one of those, in some divisions you could be, just around the top 5. And being as good in other divisions means you could be in the top 15.
Yeah, well, I did see that little melee at the end. And I thought the reaction from the crowd was very disappointing. I don't think Team Figueroa did anything untoward to deserve drinks thrown on them. I didn't realize the guy that did that kick was Andrew Kane. I didn't even know that guy was a fighter. Okay. Mm-hmm. What is it with that team and kicking? I
don't know. Perhaps they come from mixed martial arts or something.
Yeah. Jeez. Okay. Well, yeah, I might have to go back and watch that one. And what about Jack Turner as well? I heard a fair bit of talk about him.
Jack is a really big puncher. He's at 115. I don't know. I didn't look at the weights. He looked a lot bigger than the guy he was fighting. So I don't know if he was actually, fighting at bantamweight and the guy was a pound or two light. He was fighting. At the moment, he looks the part, but we haven't seen him really kind of fight a guy that is all that. And over here, because he's a super flyweight, it's tough because European, Commonwealth, and British, those divisions aren't really strong over here. We don't even have like some of those, like a British super flyweight champion and a European. They're not very often. We don't even have them title fights. So for him, he's fighting these guys from Nicaragua and wherever. All of a sudden, I think probably maybe next or later in the year, we'll see him perhaps in an international fight where he fights for like a WBC international fight, and then they'll start moving him. He looks the part, but again, we've not seen him in with anybody that would give us a bit of an idea of perhaps how good he is,
Yeah. I just looked at the weights on BoxRec, which I don't know how accurate that is, but Jack Turner, 114 pounds, and his opponent, 114 and 3/4,
Okay.
apparently.
He looked bigger on the night. Obviously, they would put some weight on. I mean, they're kind of a bit bullish about him, saying he's the biggest puncher at the weight and everything. And I'm like, you know what? Like, establish yourself before you really go making these bold, or where this, that, the other, like, Bam is streets ahead of everybody at the weight. You just getting your feet wet in the weight. So, yeah. But I mean, he's definitely one to keep an eye on, and I think he's exciting. And I think probably the next couple of fights, you will hear more about him. I think he's definitely got a lot of potential to make waves at 115 and even 118 down the road.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you've certainly got me excited to go back and check those fights out, which I certainly will do this week. So thanks for breaking that down, Anson. And now we move to not this weekend, but the following weekend. We've got a massive, this is a perfect time to reach out to you. There's so much big UK action going on. We've got the Leigh Wood-Josh Warrington rematch coming up. And I don't know if you saw it, but they did that fantastic ad where they're both in old people's makeup, like they're elderly guys and they're still in the gym and stuff. I thought it was excellent marketing. That's a great way to get some attention on a fight. It seems to me like this is a pretty big fight over in the UK. Obviously, they're staging it as a main event. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen any backlash towards it or anything like that. I wouldn't imagine there would be. I mean, the Leigh Wood-Josh Warrington, Kakachi, Mauricio Lara, of the last couple of years, these guys have just been action heroes in incredible fights. Is the demand and the anticipation pretty high for this fight over on the UK soil, Anson?
I think when it turns to fight week, it'll sort of ramp it up. It's very much, as you say, very much like a British fight, because I don't think it really has repercussions on the world level, because both guys, and I think that's why, because both guys are at a similar stage why nobody has a problem with it, because they're both, seen better days. They're both in their mid-30s. Winner stays on, really. I mean, obviously, they're both coming off losses, if I'm not mistaken. So both guys need a win if they're to stay relevant and to stay out there. I mean, I think both guys have got big fan backings. It's funny because I don't know if it's the same with some Aussie boxers if they have a certain sports team, but Josh Warrington is a big Leeds soccer team. He'll do the old put the scarf around his face. He'll have the club colours. He'll be waving them. And Leigh Wood, I know Leigh. I don't say well, but I know him. He's a big Nottingham Forest fan, and those they'll bring those football rivalries. And I expect it to be quite a lively crowd from that point of view. So I think that all plays into it. And obviously last time Warrington looked like he was, I think he probably put about 3-4 rounds and looked like he was starting to get control and really get a stranglehold on the fight. And then out of nowhere, Leigh Wood got that, got the win. And we've seen probably in the chat back and forth where Warrington is like, I had you, and but I won. Was Wood's response. So they're both going to be confident because Leigh's going to know he can stop Warrington, and Warrington's going to know that he can outbox him, and it'll just be who has more left, I think, at this stage.
Yeah, I can't wait. Like that, those guys and some of the others we mentioned as well, like that British, featherweight, super featherweight scene has just been so awesome and entertaining to watch for the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It's been so much fun. So I'm super pumped for that fight. Free on DAZN too, which is excellent. No pay-per-view internationally. I'm not sure. Is it pay-per-view in the UK?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
That's good. That's good. Is there anything on the undercard that you can sort of get us excited about, Anson, that sort of caught your eye?
You'll have it in front of you. Is that Kakachi Dickens? Is that the same?
You are right. I do have it in front of me. No. So the co-main, according to BoxRec, is Ishmael Davis and Bilal Fawaz. Sandy Ryan's on the card. She's fighting Carla Zamora. And then as we go down, there's a lot of sort of developmental fighters. Molly McCann, TMA 8.
Kakachi Dickens, I think, is the 14th of March. I got it mixed up. I wasn't sure if it was on that one. It's the 14th of March, yeah. I think in terms of the undercard, it's an opportunity for others to kind of put their names out there. But I don't think, I think probably when you looked at it, Matchroom, they didn't need to really stack it. Personally, I love it when, I'm greedy when they do. But I think they probably didn't need to because they're probably thinking was, we have, this fight, people are coming for this. This is 90% of the ticket sales and people who tune in will watch that. So I think they probably didn't need to load the undercard.
Yeah. Yeah, it does look on paper now that I'm looking at it, like a top heavy card. Looks like an Aussie card, to be honest. That's how we roll over here. But certainly one I'm very much excited for coming up in about a week and a half. But let's look forward, if we can, Anson, to coming up on February 21st, which will be the 22nd in Australia. We've got our king. We are boxing fans. Our king is returning, King Rye. The king of boxing, Ryan Garcia, coming off a loss to Rolly Romero, is lining up for a back-to-back fight for the welterweight title, which is puzzling. He's fighting the WBC champion Mario Barrios, coming off 2 draws, which is interesting in its own right. I mean, there's so many unknowns and question marks about this fight that I think actually make it more interesting, funnily enough, which boxing has a weird way of doing. But what are your thoughts on this fight, Anson, and what are you expecting to see when the bell goes for round 1?
It's interesting because I think Ryan has got his opportunity. He didn't look great last time out. It was more the Haney fight that ultimately we saw, but didn't happen, if you like, now. That really we think perhaps he can do anything. I'm not a particularly big Ryan Garcia fan. When you saw him at the press conference, he's all amped up and everything, and I think he's, he believes in his own hype, and to me, I don't think he's particularly special. I think we were talking about the Shakurs and the Haneys and people like that. And yes, okay, people could say, "Oh, he beat Haney," but he was enhanced on the night,
and didn't make weight.
Yes, and didn't make weight and had no. And I think that's one of those things that can often tell you. You look back and it's almost like ignorance and arrogance not to make weight. But anyway, going to this fight, I mean, I don't think that Barrios is great. It's not one of these when you look back to some of the welterweight champions, and I know this is a particularly high bar, but when you had Whitaker, Ike Quarty, Trinidad, De La Hoya, Crawford, there's been Spence more recently as well. There's been so many really elite guys, and this is a guy that's very good, but he's not elite in my eyes. And I think the fact that he's not elite is why Manny decided to put his hand up and come out of retirement. I think that's why Ryan Garcia is in this fight. Welterweight division, I said at the top of the show, I think middleweight is particularly and I don't think welterweight. I think we've got some younger guys coming through that maybe, but they're still a ways away. And I think more welterweight, what we're seeing is an influx of guys coming from 135, 140, and they're moving their way up. That's what's restocking the division at the moment. But I think with Barrios, he's just good enough to be to have got the title, but everyone's kind of sharks. They're circling around waiting for their opportunity, and I think that's why Ryan's taking a bite. I think it's intriguing because we don't know if he can put it together in a fight, because I think Barrios is going to be here and Ryan could be down here or he could be up here, and it depends on which Ryan turns up on the night. He should be the best version of himself because this is a world title fight, but you see him all amped up, and he's one of these guys that would be like, oh, it doesn't matter if I win a world title, but you know what, it kind of is nice on your resume. It's nice, you can forever say you've been a world champion. That's what these guys are in the sport for, So, if you ask me to pick, I don't know if we've got there yet, but I think it's super intriguing because I don't really know what version of Ryan will arrive on fight night.
You broke it down. You must have read my mind exactly, because that's basically exactly what I think, but you just delivered it more eloquently than I could answer. You're exactly right. It's who knows what's going on with Ryan Garcia. Sort of similar to Teofimo, but he hasn't got the resume and the high quality wins that probably Teo had. I mean, obviously the Devin Haney one's marred, and probably his best win besides that was the Luke Campbell fight 5 years ago, which was an excellent performance at the time. I rated Luke Campbell super highly. I thought he was going to win that fight too, almost did in the second round. But, credit to Ryan. So Ryan showed in the past his recuperative powers, and he showed that he's a warrior and he can get off the canvas and make things happen and create something. But, yeah, are we going to get that guy, to your point, or are we going to get the guy who's scrolling on his phone and hasn't taken training camp seriously? And we don't know. I mean, it's making the fight more interesting for me to watch. I don't really have a horse in the race, but I'm not saying it's like car crash TV, but it's certainly a fight that you need to see what's going to happen, because it seems like anything good.
In terms of like with Ryan, I don't find it particularly like engaging. I find it quite cringe when he was at the press conference, he's jumping around and he's amped up, and I'm like, maybe it's a generational thing, but I'm looking, I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is not like, I think the one thing is boxing tends to be quite humbling. He's gonna get in there, and even if he wins this one, he's gonna fight, and I mean, he puts eyeballs on it, and I don't have to watch it, but it brings eyes to boxing. And I think at some point, it's not like other sports where you can say it and you don't have to back it up. At some point in boxing, you do. So he's gonna, it's humbling like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll move on to the co-main event, at least according to BoxRec. It's got it listed as, and we mentioned him earlier too. And I think this is the fight my most anticipated. I'm really, really looking forward to this. Gary Antoine Russell defends his WBA super lightweight title against the undefeated 24-0 Andy Hiraoka. I'm ultra excited for this one. Anson, are you the same?
I'm excited just firstly, and no disrespect to Hiraoka, I'm just excited to see Russell back, because I don't know what it is with the Russell surname, but they just don't fight very often. I think Gary Russell was the featherweight champion for about 7 years and made like 5 title defenses. We'd see him annually once a year, and it must have almost been, he must be a very good team player or in his contract, because he'd just take his fight, make, for argument's sake, 200-300 grand, I'm good, I'll see you next year, because he fought, won, and then we'd see him. And it seems the same sort of thing with Gary Antoine. He's, content, or it appears outside looking in, he's content where he is. We saw him win in March. That we're obviously hoping he was going to be back at the end of the year. This fight had moved and has now landed there. So he'll have been off 11 months. Hiraoka's been out a year. Not ideal for either. But I think, it's great. Hiraoka is unbeaten. Russell taken 1L, but it was like kind of controversial. And there's, to me, I think if we take outside of Shakur, who's just come up to the weight, he's one of those guys that I think is very, very good. And I think it almost feels like with him, he could do with those 3 fights a year to really, as a champion, if he could do that, build some momentum. I would imagine if he could fight in Maryland, he's from Washington, D.C., if he could fight there, you could, I don't know, but I would feel like in that sort of the DMC area, you could put him on and really make a name out of him. But I mean, it never happened with his big brother, so maybe not. But I definitely feel like he's a really talented guy, but just as lack the activity. I think I'd favour him. I mean, it's in the US. I think we kind of know with him, Hiraoka's got some nice wins. I mean, he's got an understated win over Jin Sasaki a few years ago.
Yes.
And Jin is a big punching welterweight, But I do favour, Russell. I just think he's an extremely, good guy and a bit under the radar to that extent.
Yeah, well, I love this fight. I'm so excited for it, and I'm leading Hiraoka a little bit.
Okay.
I just feel like boxing from that southpaw stance, he's going to be taller and longer against that fight with Ismael Barroso, his last fight, and we know Barroso isn't the fastest, the most athletic, fast guy, Speedy Gonzalez type thing. But, he's got big power, and he, should have won some fights that he got robbed in the past against some pretty big names. So I still think that the win was good. Hiraoka barely got touched. I thought he was brewing. He fought on the back foot. He was landing that southpaw right hook. Ismael Barroso is a forward-coming fighter, front-charging fighter, similar to Gary Antoine Russell. Obviously, Russell's faster and throws better in combination and is probably more intelligent, but I just feel like that with the style clash, it's going to be like a bull and a matador.
Okay.
And I just sort of like the matador on this one a little bit. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see what happens, but I'm really excited for that fight. I'm expecting it to be highly competitive.
I thought in terms of it, like what I think of Russell, I leaned with him. But it's got me more intrigued now because, like, obviously you're championing Hirooka, and I've seen him up fighting some of the Japanese cards in the past. I remember writing about him as a new faces several years ago, but he never got that step, out of into international class. I think because obviously 140 is a bit bigger than many of the top Japanese fighters. We obviously saw Brian Norman go fight the aforementioned Sasaki, but generally the Japanese kind of top out at 130, 35, and 140 just seemed to get him guys in Japan. He was by far and away, even in the Orient, he was by far and away the best. So I think, this is definitely a big step up for him. But I think, with Russell, it's also quite possibly one of, I know he lost to it controversially, I think, but he's definitely, not a guy that he should sleep on.
Yeah, this is a fantastic fight. And I believe I'm going to be testing my memory here, which isn't great, Anson. You'll probably be able to help me out. It was originally scheduled, it was supposed to be on a card that got cancelled.
Yeah, it would have been Fedora Thurman, I think. Was that in about November? October, November?
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So seemingly both guys have had a long time to prepare for each other. That can only be a good thing, I think. So, I love that fight. I could talk about it forever, but we'll move on. We've got Richardson Hitchens defending his recently won world title for the second time over another front-charging guy, Oscar Duarte. Similar kind of style clash-ish with the roles reversed a little bit that we were talking about with Russell and Hirooka, with Hitchens and Duarte. Anson, what are you expecting from this fight?
I think, first I'm glad that Hitchens is, because I think he's one of these guys that needs a world title. Someone like Ryan Garcia, he doesn't need a world title because he'll have eyes on him anyway and he's going to make it about him. Hitchens, I don't know him personally. I did do a New Faces many moons ago on Hitchens when he was with Mayweather. But I think in terms of Mayweather's let him go, Eddie kind of built him. I thought it was a bit unfair. Was it when he beat Kambosos, he said, my deal's up, I'm available, and nobody jumped on it. And eventually, several months later, Eddie goes and gets him back, I think. And he's the type of guy that he needs to be, fighting 2-3 times a year. And all of a sudden you look and you go, he's been a champion for 4 years and he's made 8-9 defenses to get his respect. He's one of those type of guys, because he's not like as though you have to see him. He's the guy that if you were making dinner reservations on a Saturday night, you may just press record and come home and watch it. You don't cancel your plans to go watch it. He's the type of guy that will build his resume. I think, for him, having beaten like Kambosos, it was the sort of fight, almost maybe he needed to do that in Australia to have built that impact. It wouldn't have helped him in the US, obviously, but I don't think it helped him anyway, winning. But then this is the type of fight I think Duarte's style will bring out the best in him. But at the same time, he has to be the best version of himself because otherwise Duarte's in nice form at the moment. So he also has that, Robert Garcia factor, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Robert Garcia is in his corner. If Robert brings a guy, then, and they're the B-side, the perceived B-side anyway, you always take that seriously because you know that they're not just coming for a paycheck. This guy can fight. Robert doesn't mess with them otherwise, So I think that makes me, in terms of talent, is Hitchens. In terms of, but he could do almost what I think Gustavo Lemos did. He could perhaps run, Hitchens out of there, So it'll be, it's got the ability to be intriguing. We obviously saw Robert recently in the corner of, Murataya against Andy Cruz. I think my feeling going in was that, Cruz is the more talented guy, but Murataya is with Top Rank and he is with Robert Garcia. They're pretty astute guys. Garcia doesn't mess with somebody. He's a world champion. He's not there for no reason. And it played out as it went later in the fight. He pulled away and showed this is what it's like fighting 12 rounds. He pushed the fight. He won the fight. And I think the same thing with Duarte. Is he able to do enough in the first half that in the second half of the fight, he makes it count?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Hitchens is the type of guy that, and perfect recall, your memory is impeccable, Anson. I completely forgot this guy's name, but Gustavo Lemos. Like, if you stand and try and box from sort of a long or mid-range with Richards and Hitchens, good luck. You've just served yourself up to him. He's not necessarily going to put the foot down and try and get you out of there, but you're going to find it very difficult to win rounds. You have to get in on him and make him fight a fight he doesn't want to fight. And I thought Lemos was robbed at the time. Credit to Hitchens. He's a very difficult puzzle to solve. We've had Liam Parrow wasn't able to do it. I thought Liam would have great success there. I didn't like George's chances either, and ultimately that was proven correct. But, Oscar Duarte is a pretty rugged dude. The whole question for me is, can he take Hitchens to a part of the ring where he doesn't want to be and at a distance he doesn't want to be? And I completely forgot he was trained by Robert Garcia. So, man, I was sort of thinking like 70-30 Hitchens. Now you've kind of getting me closer to 50-50 with the Robert Garcia factor, considering the tear he's on lately, Anson. But, I'm more excited for that fight now after your breakdown. So thanks for sharing, mate. But and rounding out the card, because there is only 4 fights listed on BoxRec currently, we've got Frank Martin taking on Nahir Albright. Albright coming off that win over Keyshawn's brother, and we mentioned earlier there was that whole debacle backstage with the Davis family jumping him and his team, which was a really horrible black eye for the sport. And Frank Martin back after that massive one-punch knockout on Rancis Barthélemy. So what are your thoughts here?
I think with Frank won on a PBC show. When was it? November, December? So it's a very quick turnaround for a PBC.
December.
For a fighter who's fighting at an elite level, it's very quick turnaround. For a PBC guy, it's insanely quick because they obviously have less cards at the moment and have done for a year or two now. So they obviously strike while the iron's hot. He beat Rancis Barthélemy, who, yes, was old, but nobody had done that to him. So the way he took him out was ultra impressive. So to go from that into this one, I think he can build some real momentum. I think Albright, like you said, he's coming off that win. When was that? That would have been like June or something last year. But he's in a good place. But I look at Albright as a guy that's kind of a good, solid American, whereas I look at Martin as a bit more on the world level. So I think when it plays out, I think he's just that step ahead. Is it a 10 or a 12 rounder?
Oh, good call. It is scheduled for 10.
Okay, so I think it's kind of a 7-3 type of fight. I think, now he is good enough to definitely make Martin work. And I think he looked good last time, Frank Martin. And I always thought he was good on his way up at lightweight. And then he was obviously off for a long time after the Gervonta fight. I think he's changed trainers. He used to be, he still, I think, is with Errol Spence, who kind of looks after him, but he's no longer with Derek James.
Yeah.
I can't think who he's with now, to be honest. But I'm sure he changed trainers after that loss. And the fact that he's going from December to such a quick turnaround, I think he's going to be kind of advanced to whether it's, I've seen the back and forth with him and Hitchens. I think there's going to be a fight like that after this. I think as long as he goes in and does his thing, that I would imagine that by late summer, that Martin will be in with one of the guys. Maybe, if Gary Antoine Russell wins, there's 2 US guys, or, maybe I could see that type of fight happening.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think of that. I honestly didn't even realize this fight was at 140. So there you go.
Those guys were top 10 guys at lightweight when Rancis was the champion at lightweight.
Yeah,
And obviously, sorry, I got mixed up there. Yeah, Martin fought for the title, and Albright has been at lightweight, I think, in the past.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. No, thanks for breaking that down. Well, mate, I reckon that's a pretty good 4-fight card. I'm pretty excited for that card coming up on the...
PBC normally announce, like, the week of the fight. They keep it pretty closed. They'll probably have someone fairly solid-ish, I think probably last time Martin was on this portion, they'll probably have 1 or 2 guys who are going to be, coming out and rounding out the card. They'll probably have 2 or 3 more. They sometimes do like 2 or 3, and then they have 2 or 3 just before the main one, which you can view free, and then they do the main event. Yeah, so I think they'll do a bit more. I have seen, I don't know whose show it could be. It's on one of these, and it was a middleweight fight. Yoneli Hernandez against what's his name? Is American middleweight with Top Rank.
Okay.
And that was a good fight. I mean, I do think Yoneli Hernandez is the future at middleweight, but I can't think of his name now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember. I've got Snapchat memory.
I'll have a look as we're talking because it is a good fight.
Yeah, I was actually going to type it in, but I don't know how to spell Yoneli. So I sort of
find him as we're chatting away. Yeah. But
it's definitely a good card. I'm not sure of the pay-per-view status in Australia. I would imagine that it would be a DAZN global payper-view. So it's pay-per-view everywhere. So is it worth paying for?
I beg your pardon, Jahi Tucker.
Gotcha.
So it's a good two younger guys, an opportunity for both. I mean, I favour Hernandez, but I mean, he's got a good opponent in this one.
Yeah, well, that's good out of 4 fights, and that's a pretty solid main card. And to your point, if they're going to be bolstering the card with some more names, we just don't know who they are yet. It's only going to increase the enjoyment factor for us watching. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be something to look forward to in a couple of weeks. But just before we finish up, Anson, I just want to throw one more at you because this one completely took me by surprise. The fight had to go to a purse bid. Liam Parrow was mandatory for Lewis Crocker's IBF welterweight title. Now, we thought over here, little old Australian promoter going up against Matchroom, we're absolutely no chance. And I think it was about 20 grand difference, but No Limit, Liam's promoter, have won the purse bid, and they have made it adamantly clear that they are holding this fight in Australia. Were you shocked that Matchroom were unable to secure to win that purse bid?
Do you know Matchroom have got a bit of a history for not doing very well at purse bids, so I'm not shocked in that regard. And wasn't it No Limit who when they supposed to do Donovan against Parrow, and they won that purse bid, so they won 2. So I'm glad for them because obviously Donovan, I don't know what happened, but pulled out a couple of weeks before the fight. So
he got sick about 3 weeks out, apparently.
Yeah. So that opened the door for Parrow to do this one. So I'm glad that it was a situation you won the right to the eliminator. So I'm glad he's not having to go to jolly old England when it was like, hang on a minute, I was supposed to be fighting this guy in Australia. We did our thing. We won the purse bid. So I'm glad that he didn't have the carpet pulled from him in that regard. It's a good fight. I mean, it's one of those, neither guy we don't have either in the top 10 at Ring Magazine. But I do think, like, if there's a winner and they're definitive, they've got a real shout at the top 10 in that instance because it's not a strong division. Crocker won the title. I don't know what you guys would have seen of it. He had a 2-fight series with Donovan.
Yeah.
He won both, but was getting beaten in the first one when he got hit after the bell and then wasn't able to continue. So he won a disqualification. The rematch was very close, but he got two very early knockdowns, which, because they were like that made them 10-8 rounds. Was it 10-8 or 10? Were they both the same round? I forget now. But because he was able
round
to get
2 and round 5, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Because he got those 2 knockdowns, that was basically the difference between the 2 on the night. So he may have actually lost more rounds certainly over the 2 fights, he's lost more rounds. But in the rematch, he may have lost more rounds, but because of the knockdowns, he was able to edge the fight. So he's found himself as a world champion, and he's a good fighter. I remember seeing him during COVID, and they would put shows on. I think at the time it was MTK. They put some shows on. I remember watching him, and he did catch my eye. I thought, oh, this guy's got a bit about him, a bit like O'Leary Pierce at 140. I'd seen him at the same time. I was like, yeah, this guy's, I think he could do something. I don't know what, but I definitely want to see him again. So I've seen, obviously, Crocker go from there. Interestingly, he's changed trainers. He's no longer with Billy Nelson, who got him title fight. He's with somebody I'm not familiar with. And Billy Nelson's jumped on that, saying, I've won world titles with my fighters. This guy, who is he and where have you? But nothing to do with me. That's obviously the fighter's choice. He feels comfortable there. But he's going to a total different ecosystem. It's a long, long way. I don't know when. They haven't announced the fight yet, have they? They just announced they're going to hold it in.
I think the rumours on the ground here are that they want to hold it in like late March.
Okay.
So pretty quick. Yeah, which is
because
sort
of
of
course
surprising.
Paro would have been in training camp. He just needs to change from Donovan to Crocker. And honestly, the funny thing is that they would have watched that fight looking to prepare for Donovan. And now they're going to be watching the same fight looking the other way around, looking to prepare for Crocker. So it'll be, for Paro, he won his world title and lost his world title in Puerto Rico. So for him, he has that opportunity to do something, in Australia. I imagine that the way you guys are, if he can win this fight, there's so many big options, but he'd be a real name. You could, like when you once upon a time, Jeff Horn was able to bring Manny Pacquiao. There may exist something along those lines where you're able to bring a big name to Australia because you're going to sell out, the Suncorp or somewhere and put 50,000 in there. I don't know, if that's possible. I don't know if Liam has that kind of reach, but outside, looking in, I would imagine that would be the ideal scenario. But first, obviously, you've got to win the fight. And I think it's one of those, there's many different things, you could kind of look at in that. Like, we don't really know. We saw how sharp Crocker was when he got those knockdowns, and he was able to box quite cutely and surprise. Really, it was kind of a bit like Carl Frampton when he fought, Leo Santa Cruz. We saw the first fight, but Leo only fights one way. And when Leo Santa Cruz came on the second fight and fought a total different way, it threw Frampton off. And I think it was much the same with Crocker in that fight. So I think in terms of this one, it'll be interesting to see, he's obviously got to deal with probably arriving, a week before the fight in Australia. It's so different having time zones and everything like that. I mean, yes, speak the same language and everything, but it's a very different, situation fighting at home and away. So I give him, crazy credit if he's able to do that. But to me, it's kind of a 50-50 fight and many intangibles.
Yeah, no, very much so, and I'm glad you pointed that out. The different style, the style that Crocker brought to each fight was starkly different, which showed, not only a great ability by him to implement a game plan, but also his trainer and his team to create a game plan and change it up for the second fight to give him more success.
And now we have a different team again.
It makes the decision. So there must have been something going on back, behind the scenes we don't know about, because it seems like a puzzling decision, but I think, one that probably.
I think Paro's style, from what I've seen of him, suits him well because it's not like he's a good boxer himself. So if he comes to a match of wills, he's able to box with him. But if Crocker brings aggression, he's still able to box the same way. You just pick him off. So I think from that point of view, his style is like he's not going to have to worry and be different from himself. He can be himself, and whether it's he's just going to match skills, or whether he's got to take on the pressure. So I think that bodes well for him. But it's a very intriguing fight.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. I agree with that assertion for sure. And, Liam's last fight was his first actual fight at 147. His fight before that was at 144 and a half, I think. And he fought a Frenchman called David Papo. And it was a pretty shaky performance defensively, I thought, from Liam. It wasn't great. He went all 12 rounds and won it.
Swollen, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's why I thought it was quite a quick turnaround from, was it September to January? Because that wouldn't have left him long for the eye to heal and then get back in camp. So I think it serves him well to have that extra bit of time off. I think it's funny because it looks like No Limit, because they did it with when they had the middleweight title fight with Mikhailovic when he fought Janibek. They made that, once they won the purse bid, they did it quickly. So they tried to bum rush the guy to bring over smart. I like that. They seem to do the same with Donovan, because I thought again they would try and do it more at the back end of their allowance of time to do the fight. And again, this one you're saying to me end of March. Well, if you look at end of March, that's 6 weeks or so from now. So that's quite a quick turnaround, considering they haven't announced the date yet. And the date will, once they say to Matchroom, the date will quite quickly come out because it'll be common knowledge at that point. But they obviously, I think they're quite clever the way they do it. Some people would say sneaky, but I mean that's why you win the purse bid. You maximize. That's what people do. So kudos to them.
Yeah, and this is how weird Australian boxing is, Anson, and I'm sure you would expect this anyway, but this fight is likely to be the co-main to another Tim Tszyu tune-up in the main event. And funnily enough, the opponent, respectfully, that he's going to be rumored to fight, they put it out today that the promoter's No Limit. He's going to be fighting an Australian opponent, and they put out 5 names. I would say respectfully, all 5 names are much less heralded than Anthony Velasquez was. So it seems in opponents to be a step back with respect to those fighters. Or maybe not. Dylan Biggs was on that list, but he's at middleweight now anyway. But I won't bore you with the details. But yeah, it's going to be a Tim Tszyu main event $70 pay-per-view with a legitimate world title fight as the co-main. How insane is that?
It's bonkers. I thought that Tim Tszyu, they'd announced that Tim Tszyu was going to fight Spence, but obviously there's going to do another fight before that even possibly happens. But
they want another fight in between, and then it's down the line mid-year or so.
I'm glad you said fight. Tim and you didn't say Nikita and Zerafa, because at that point my head would have exploded. I think with Tim, it obviously says a lot about how much the Tszyu surname carries in Australian circles. I think
it is unbelievable. Yeah,
I think it's along the lines of when we had Fury and Paul, and on the undercard of that was Jack Macabre. That made no sense. But I do feel, when you've got a world title fight like this, and especially like Paro has been around a few years, so it's not like as though he's respectfully like an Australian
former world champion.
Yeah. He's not a guy that people in Australia won't know, but obviously he's not like. Paro isn't as well known as Tszyu in Australia, I presume, but the Australian market is a funny one because I remember going back to Anthony Mundine. Anthony was, I think, all of his career was on pay-per-view, and yet in the rest of the world,
except nobody 2 fights.
And nobody would have known him. He would fight, and it would be a big fight in Australia on pay-per-view, and the opponent you'd have to look up on BoxRec, but the rest of the world wouldn't miss a beat.
Yeah, I've spoken about it so many times for so many years. The Australian pay-per-view scheme is just absolutely insane. It holds the sport back so badly in this country, but they just will not change. So,
how easy is it to watch in terms of even Australia to buy the paper? Because you say it's on pay-per-view. Do you have to buy it and you watch it in the house, or are you able to go to a local bar and watch it? Because obviously that at least you're right. You know what? I'm not going to pay $70 for it, but I'll go grab a buddy, go have a couple of beers and watch it. That makes it a little bit more, accessible, but still, it's nothing quite like just putting normal TV on and being able to watch it.
Yeah, well, you can do both, You can buy it at home or buy it at a venue. But the crazy thing is, and like one of the reasons I started this podcast years ago was because just none of my mates follow boxing. I never had anyone to talk boxing to. So I was like, I'm going to start a podcast and I can talk to people about boxing, And I was speaking to a plumber on site a couple of weeks ago and, we were talking about sport. He goes, what sports do you like? I like boxing. We get into it. And, I'm saying Tim Tszyu, I'm saying Zerafa, I'm saying all these names and he's never heard of any of them. A 30-year-old plumber that loves cricket and, the perfect demographic to be a boxing fan.
Yeah.
And I go, mate, you just have absolutely no interest in this sport whatsoever. And he goes, mate, why would I have any interest in a sport that doesn't even take itself seriously?
Yeah, I was like, absolutely.
Wow. That's like a pretty profound comment just from some random guy. But
yeah, he
it's
could have
so
talked
true,
to you for 5 minutes and said that. He gave you one sentence that killed it.
I was like, fair enough, mate. I can't argue you there. But anyway, interesting times coming ahead with Parallel Crocker. We'll see. But just to finish up, Anson, you, like I mentioned in the intro, you do the awesome Best I Faced, and I love the Best I Trains too. Fantastic regular feature. What have you got coming up personally for 2026 on the writing front, mate? And also we spoke about a little bit off there, the podcast might be coming back too. Like what have you got? What can we expect from you following your work throughout the rest of the year, mate?
Good question. I just sort of see how things, they sort of plan out and work themselves out and everything. So, I think it's always, enjoyable to see the guys that are coming through. I'm about to speak to a young American 108-pounder, Terry Washington, in the next couple of days. I'm looking forward to that because, the Americans don't tend to go low in weight. So I'm intrigued. He's got an interesting backstory. So that's something I always like to, the guys coming through. I think often people, they want to write, of course we do, we want to write about the top guys because they're the ones that draw the eyeballs. But what filters through that and the next generation of guys is always, something that's, for many years I did it for the magazine. We did a New Faces, and many of the guys, look back at a list and you think, oh, they featured that one, and it's always intriguing to see how they go. You bet yourself because you spend the time to work on the story, and it's can they reach certain levels and what have you. So I always find that intriguing to see who's coming through and what have you. Boxing is one of those. There's no off days. It's always intriguing, and you've got some great characters, and people they sort of bare their souls in a way that nobody else would to a stranger. Often you see the boxers, they're these big tough guys, but they'll tell you stories. They get quite emotional about them, and they when they go into it and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's just as it comes. I mean, I've done a few bits with boxers in Japan. That's a market that really intrigues me. Obviously, it's hot at the moment, probably the hottest it's ever been. Never been to Japan. It's somewhere that's very high on my bucket list. It actually is, the number one place on my bucket list. So hopefully get there one day. But yeah, pretty much take each day as it comes and see that what news happens and what fights happen. And it's fun, obviously, doing things like this when we chat about it and we kind of expand each other's minds with it. You come up with a fight that I didn't think of, and we see a fight, and you make me intrigued in a fight that perhaps I was maybe sleeping on a bit. Like when you mentioned Russell Irioka, I probably a bit more at the main event, and that one would have come. And I'm a big advocate of Russell, but unfortunately doesn't fight enough. And then you kind of again made me think, oh, okay, Hirooka's not just I obviously we know he's a good fighter. You don't fight at this level, but you've given him more of a chance than perhaps I had done. So yeah, that's always fun. And obviously seeing fights like we saw the Ball Figueroa one, when you see a fight between probably two legit top five guys in their weight class, when they fight, when we see the unifications, when we see performers like Shakur, when we see these big knockouts, when we write and hear about guys and they're perhaps a little bit in the dark, people don't know about them. I'll give you like an example. We've over the last couple of days we've heard a guy, Osles Iglesias, who's a super middleweight. I think we've got him at number 1, I think, and he's an extremely good Cuban born, living in Germany, fighting out of Canada, and he's fighting for the vacant IBF title in April. I'm intrigued to see how that does, because he looks like one of these guys that's got a very high ceiling, but you almost look and you go, is he really that good, or is he just that good at the moment? When he steps, he's fought really good level of opposition, but when he, is he going to be like fight someone and go, oh, okay, we didn't see him quite as good. So far, he looks like he could be a pound for pound guy, but he's a guy that nobody mentions. He's a bit in the dark, and the boogeyman, if you like. We see that. Yeah. We had that Murtazuliev when he fought Tim Tszyu, and Tim was supposed to go in and was probably overconfident and got clipped, and then was blasted in 3, and then Murtazuliev is the boogeyman. No one wants to fight him, and now we've just seen him lose. So sometimes a guy, they look really good, and then they in other fights they're not so good, and perhaps the truth is somewhere in between. So you kind of look, and sometimes you think someone is on top of the world, and then only takes one night, and the things change. So it's ever evolving and intriguing sport. So enjoy it.
No, that's why we love it. But no, thank you so much, Anson. I really appreciate it. You sharing your knowledge with me and everyone listening and watching as well. And you mentioned about the Hirooka Russell fight. Maybe my take on it got you a little bit more excited. Well, you got me excited about tons of fights, and I've got to go back and watch the couple of the undercard fights from the UK show too. So no, you have definitely done the same for me, mate, and I appreciate it. And also, I do apologise again for stuffing you around yesterday with that power outage. But it's a credit to you and your generosity that you stuck around, mate, and you didn't you didn't say, look, this is too much hassle. I've had enough.
No, never too much hassle.
I appreciate it, mate. I do appreciate your time, so thank you. Perfect. And I think we mentioned it was 2 years ago last time we spoke. I'll have to make sure it's not that long between
Before
drinks
Christmas,
again next time,
before
mate.
Christmas.
For sure. I'll reach out at some stage in a few months, mate. But just stay on the line, Anson, because this will take just a minute to upload, mate. But thank you very much.
You've got it.
All right, guys, and there we had it. My second time chatting with the absolute gentleman, Anson Wainwright. I hope you guys enjoyed that. As you could probably tell, I certainly enjoyed that. An absolute ton. And as I mentioned, guys, and as in every episode, all the links to follow along with Anson's incredible work are all in the description of this episode, so you can click straight to his author page for the ring and also follow him directly on his social medias. I could not recommend it more, and you'd be helping out a very, very generous guy and a real top bloke too. So if you would like to get on and do that, I'm sure you will not regret it. So, guys, this is unbelievable. This podcast got delayed about 24, 30 hours, something like that. Unbelievably, weirdly enough, I'd always thought, imagine if this happened. And it finally did. Episode 80, plus a few solo ones that aren't numbered. So maybe we're in like the 90s in terms of episodes. I actually had a full-blown legit blackout power outage style. Like an hour before we were supposed to record, the whole suburb went down. There was no power at all, so couldn't run the computer, couldn't run anything. I had to text Anson and just be like, hey, man, I'm so sorry. I've literally got no power. I can't even turn my computer on. My phone's about to die. I can't charge it. My phone ended up dying. It was unbelievable. And to add insult to injury, excuse me, I'm an electrician. And I put generator changeover switches in for people all the time. And people always ask me why I don't have one. And I'm always like, what are the odds? And sure enough, the odds weren't in my favour, and it cost me. So I guess I'll be crawling through my roof and getting a bit dirty this weekend, putting one in so that it does not happen again. But anyway, just a funny story, and I just say that to illustrate and point out of Anson's patience. Like, I'm the one chasing him, and then an hour before we're about to record, I'm basically telling the teacher that the dog ate my homework. So I could not have blamed him if he was just like, mate, this is too annoying, leave me alone, get out of here. But yeah, to his credit, like I said in the intro and during the chat, he stuck around it, and he was very patient and very incredibly easy to deal with, and I really, really appreciate it, because unfortunately I did not make it very easy for him. My goal is to always try and make it as easy as possible for the guest, because they're the ones doing me a favor and showing me all the generosity. So, the least I can do is try and make the process as seamless and hassle-free as possible for them. And this particular time, I was unable to do that. So all credit to Anson, and I thank him very much. So the least we can do is jump on and support his great work a little bit more and boost those numbers up for him personally, just that little bit more if possible, because, he really kind of saved the day on this one. So I owe him one, that's for sure. But guys, anyway, that is wild, hey? But there you go. So if you guys want to get in contact with me, you can do that at TUSCPod@gmail.com. That's TUSCPod@gmail.com. If you want to throw a tweet at me, you can do that at delivery_man2. Guys, we've also got the Insta page, also the YouTube channel. All the links are in the description of this episode as well. And you guys can get on and consume the pod however you want to. So, guys, next episode is already pretty much locked in. I've broken my rules. I've put the pressure on. I've spoken to the guest. It's all agreed to. We're ready to go, barring any insane power outages or natural disasters. This one is all good to go. So we're going to go after the Mario Barrios Ryan Garcia card. Now, we're strategically going to be going very much later after that week. So on the TUSC, we're not going to be one of the first ones out with our thoughts, but that is for a very strategic and specific purpose. I won't hint at who the guest is, but the reason we're going a little bit late is because there is an event that is non-boxing related that is a pretty big deal for me and the guest, and we have to talk about it. It's a returning guest. We have spoken about this topic every time he's been on so far. I just gave it away. It's a bloke. Who would have thought? But Yeah, so we're going to go later in that way. And I'll put a clue out if anyone can guess. The half century is the clue, the number 50. So that is when the next episode will be out, guys, later on after the Barrios Garcia fight week. So you guys can expect us then. So yeah, we've hit the ground running pretty good this year, guys, I thought. 3 episodes in January. We'll get 2 out in Feb. So yeah, I'm going to be going for 2 episodes a month. I think that's going to be my bare minimum output. You know, for many years, I've always done 1 a month. So now we're going to double it, go 2 a month. And every now and then when the motivation's high, I might even throw in a hit out or even possibly a third normal numbered show with a guest. We'll see, but the bare minimum is going to be 2 episodes a month, I've decided, guys, but I always break my rules, so we'll see what happens. But guys, thank you very much for listening. Anyone that's left a like or subscribed to the YouTube channel, or the 5-star reviews, I never ever ask anyone to do that type of stuff because I think listening and watching is more than enough, but all those things really do help the podcast and the YouTube channel now get into our people's algorithms and stuff like that. So anyone that's taken time out of their day to help me in that respect, I thank you very much. But guys, I'm going to be back in 2 weeks. And remember, the old half century, the number 50, what could it be? If you've got an idea, hit me up. It probably isn't going to be that hard to work out. But that's when we're going to be back, guys. So enjoy the fights, and I'll chat to you then.
Well, let's travel, man of the change. Living like there's no tomorrow, then tomorrow came. Going all out. I was living like there's no tomorrow, then tomorrow came. I got the wake-up call, laughing through the window frame.